If you've ever wondered how to get that larger-than-life vocal stack sound, where the vocals still feel crisp, airy, and clean, they just sound perfectly blended and huge in the track, this video's for you. This is one of the most common questions I see. If you're not careful, big vocal stacks can easily sound muddy, distant, thin, or messy, which is why we're simplifying the entire process in this video, from the recording and tracking tips you need to achieve this effect, all the way through how to get the final mix dialed in perfectly to get that larger-than-life vocal stack. We'll make it easy to follow along so you can apply these tips and tricks in your next session. Let's get started. First, let's talk about arrangement and tracking. This is where it all starts. And in order to have a great mix, we need to make sure we have great tracks to start with. Take a look at this session. It might look like there's just a bunch of vocals stacked on top of each other, but there's actually a very specific organization to how this track is arranged. For example, in this vocal stack, we have 8 vocal tracks. The first 4 tracks are in unison, meaning it's the same part, just sung 4 different times.
Waiting and waiting, waiting and waiting, waiting and waiting, waiting and waiting.
So you can hear that's just 4 of the exact same part, the same notes, just layered one on top of another. Then the next 2 are a harmony up from that.
Waiting and waiting, waiting and waiting.
So you notice again that 5 and 6 are the same exact musical part, just recorded twice. Then we have 7 and 8.
Waiting and waiting, waiting and waiting.
A different musical part, again recorded twice. And this pattern is used throughout the entire track. You can see in the chorus we have a stack of 6 vocals here.
No, no, no,
And again, it's 2 of the same part,
no, no, no,
just sung twice. Another 2 of the same part, sung 2 different times.
no, no, no,
And once again.
no, no, no.
So the pattern is this. Whenever you have a vocal stack, record each harmony twice, and then pan one to the left and one to the right. They don't have to be all the way panned to the left and right, but just giving it some stereo image is a great way to add size to the vocal stack. Just for demonstration purposes, take a listen to what it sounds like if they just recorded 1 vocal per part.
No, 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 no.
So when you compare the single tracked to the double tracked and panned version, you can hear how much bigger and wider it sounds right off the bat before we even do any processing. Take one more listen to that and just listen to how much smaller it sounds if we'd only recorded 1 vocal per track.
No, 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 no.
It's a much bigger sound, and that's with just 2 tracks per part. You could take this even further and do 4 tracks per part or 8 tracks per part and get an even bigger sound. A quick note on this before we move on. You have to actually record each part twice. You can't just copy and paste it from one performance. Otherwise, you won't be able to achieve this effect. It's important that you give it multiple performances and then pan it out. That's what's going to give us this effect. So once you make sure you have a good arrangement and the right tracks to work with, let's talk about some processing techniques in order to take these vocals to the next level. Now, first up, let's talk about an important tip if you're tuning your vocal stacks. If you have a stack of vocals and you want it to sound big, it's the human variation and the tiny little differences between each of the parts that gives us that big vocal stack sound when we put it all together. If you slap a tuner on all of the vocal tracks and you tune it like you would a lead vocal, you're going to erase all of those little micro differences and you're going to lose some of that natural chorusing. It's going to make the vocal stack sound smaller. So let me show you an easy way to avoid that. We have Xpitch loaded up on each of these tracks, and we have the group enabled, so they're all in group 1, and you can see that that means that when we adjust one, it's going to adjust all of them. It's a good workflow feature when you're dialing in big vocal stacks with Xpitch. Now, if we turn the transition and strength all the way up, we're getting full tuning, classic robotic tuning effect.
No, 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 don't think it.
And you notice on the sustains of these notes, it actually starts to sound kind of smaller. It almost kind of snaps in place and it just sounds too perfect. It doesn't sound like a big stack of vocals. What we want is, instead of tuning it perfectly to the note center, we want to just get it closer to the note center. So we get a nice natural tuning, but we're not erasing all the human variation in each of these parts. And that's where the strength knob comes in. So I'll set a decent transition somewhere around 10 or 15 milliseconds, and then I'm going to adjust the strength knob. Now, what this knob does to the algorithm is it tells it not to tune it 100% of the way to the note center. It says just tune it closer to the note center by however much we set here. So if you're singing off the note center and you set it to 100%, it's going to snap it to the note center. But if you set it to 50%, it's only going to get 50% of the way from wherever you're at. And that allows you to maintain that human variation in the pitch. So you can see why this is so valuable. It's not just for keeping human variation in a lead vocal tuning. It's also great when you have background vocals or stacks of vocals, and you want to make sure you don't start to sound too robotic or vocodery. You want it to give it a more natural feel.
No, no, no. Done thinking. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't worry.
And we can hear it's a subtle opening up in the track as we pull the strength knob down. It sounds nice and in tune, but not 100% tuned, so we're still getting that big chorus effect. And that's one of the things I love about Xpitch is it's just so easy to control the algorithm and tell it exactly how much you want to apply. It really comes in handy in a case like this. So let's move on to the rest of the processing to take these vocals to the finish line. For a big stack of vocals like this, I like to load up Xvox Comp on each of the individual tracks, and I'll flip over here to the tube plus FET mode. And I'll basically be dialing it in to get, maybe 6 dB of gain reduction.
No, no, no.
And it's just going to add a thickness and color to this vocal stack when I copy it across all the individual tracks. Take a listen before and after.
No, no, no. No, no, no. No, no, no.
So it's just big, warm, full sounding. I really like where that's going. So next I'll load up Xvox Pro on the entire stack of vocals. In Logic Pro, I can do this with a track stack. In other DAWs, I could just create an aux track and route all the vocal tracks to that. But basically, I just want to process the entire stack all at once. First up, I'll play with the tone module to add a little bit of shine and polish.
No, no, no. Done thinking. All I do is think about you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You see how we can really quickly dial in the vocal tone we want just by pulling up some of the highs and mids to give it some more presence, adding a little bit of Air Plus to give it a nice shine and polish without adding any harshness, and then just tucking some of the lows down to cut any mud.
No, no, no. Done thinking. No, no, no. Done thinking. No, no, no. Done thinking.
Next, we need a little bit of ambience. We don't want to go too crazy and make it super washed out with reverb, but a little bit of reverb and delay might be nice.
You say not to think about it, but all I do is think about you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You say not to worry about it, but all I do is worry about you. You know I try to fight it.
This vibrant mode is one of my favorites. Take a listen to it soloed.
No, no, no. Done thinking. All I do is think about you.
And a little bit of delay gives it a beautiful space to fit into this track. We can actually play around with a little modulation here as well, like this Mega Mod. One of my favorites. We don't need a lot of it, but just a little bit to add some more thickness to this stack.
No, no, no. Done thinking. All I do is think about you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't worry.
So that's really adding the next level of thickness to this vocal stack. Just makes it sound even bigger. The last thing I'm thinking is just a little bit of glue to kind of bring all these vocals together. And for that, I'll look at the Dynamics, this Vox Bus compressor. It's just a nice gentle compressor. It's going to kind of glue all these vocals together.
No, no, no. Done thinking. All I do is think about you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's sounding incredible. Super easy to dial in with Xvox Pro. Take a listen before and after.
No, no, no. Done thinking. No, no, no. Done thinking. No, no, no. Done thinking.
So the last tip is how to blend these vocals into the track in the right way. Now this is all going to depend on the track itself, but a lot of times if you're struggling to get the vocals to sound big, it might just be that they're too quiet. Like even with this vocal stack, which is really big sounding, if we turn it down enough,
You say not to think about it, but all I do is think about you.
all of a sudden it sounds really small. Now, one of the benefits of this workflow where you create a group or an aux track where all your background vocals in the stack go to it is you can just easily kind of pick them all up and set them where you feel it should be. So that's what I'm doing here with this one. And a lot of times I'm visualizing the mix in kind of 3 different parts right now. I'm keeping that lead vocal as the most forward, most upfront thing in the mix. And then I've got the track that's kind of behind it. And what I'm trying to do is put those background vocal stacks right in between those two. So I'm trying to keep them behind the lead, but in front of the rest of the track. And generally that's what I find is a good spot for this type of effect. So where we had it just now, this would be like the vocal stack being behind the track.
You say not to think about it, but all I do.
it sounds more distant. It sounds like it's further behind the actual beat, which doesn't work. If we put it way too far up, it's going to sound like it's in front of the lead vocal. Now it sounds like we've got a bunch of vocalists kind of off to the side here and the lead vocal is somewhere over there. So we want to kind of visualize this and say, okay, let's bring this vocal down until it's just right behind the lead vocal. So now it feels really nice. It feels like that background vocal stack is right behind the lead vocal. Everything's super clear. It sounds big. Take a listen before and after the processing we did. You say not to think about it. You say not to think about it. You say not to think about it. So that's a great step-by-step approach to getting these larger-than-life vocal stacks. Make sure you start with the right material, record 2 or 4 of each part, and pan them out to get a big stereo image. Then make sure you don't over-tune your vocals. Use something like the strength knob in Xpitch to lock in a great tuning, but still to keep that human variation that gives it the nice big sound. Then dial in some processing with Xvox Pro. I like to use Xvox Comp on each of the individual tracks, and then use tone, space, SFX, all that on the actual bus or the aux track. And finally, try visualizing where you want it to be in the mix. Place it right where it needs to be so that it's behind the lead vocal, but in front of the rest of the track. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Give it a like and subscribe for more tutorials like this, and leave us a comment with whatever else you'd like us to make a video on. And as always, happy mixing.